from Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. Here's today's lineup. K-State's Jane Lingenfelser will report on the results from K-State's 2019 corn hybrid performance trials, which are now available to you growers to help you evaluate potential hybrids for planting in 2020. She'll highlight region by region the hybrids which tended to stand out this past year. Then K-State's Robin Reid and LaVell Winsor will offer another reminder about the Farm Financial Skills for Women in Agriculture workshops coming up in January and February. The registration deadline is coming up soon. And on this week's horticulture segment, K-State's Ward Upham will talk about planning for next year's vegetable gardening. That's what's ahead on this Agriculture Today.
Kansas farmers and ranchers are helping feed your family in the world. The largest contributor to the Kansas economy is beef cattle. How do you get that juicy steak on your plate? In order for you to enjoy your tasty meal, it requires the hard work of the producers, marketers, advertisers, processors, inspectors, transporters, packers, and consumers. So thank all these people and sit back, relax, and enjoy your tasty meal.
Thanks once again for tuning in for Agriculture Today on the K-State Radio Network. We understand that the growing season 2019 for you row crop producers was something of a grind, no thanks to the weather patterns we saw in the state. Well, a fair amount of that is reflected in what we'll cover today, the just completed results of the K-State corn hybrid performance trials around Kansas in 2019. We welcome back in Jane Lingenfelser. Jane's the agronomist in charge of K-State's crop performance tests, and we'll say right out, first of all, the results are available. That's the good thing, Jane.
They are, and that address of our website is agronomy, that's agronomy.ksu.edu, and the entire 2019 Corn Book will be published as an insert, as it usually is, in High Plains Journal magazine, and that will come out in early January, hopefully, or can be found electronically at the K-State Research and Extension Digital Publications Library, and that address is ksre.ksu.edu/bookstore, and click on the corn link.
So online or in hard copy, it'll be available either now or in the very, very near future. Well, there were no drought issues, or very few, in this corn growing season just passed. That was
very
the difference.
Few, yes. The 2019 growing season was pretty much all about rainfall and whether or not the corn was having too much of a good thing. And as it has been in the past few years, planting was once again delayed by the wet conditions across the state. And once it was planted, many fields had heavy rains that affected early growth and either caused them to be replanted or caused uneven stands and lack of uniformity. And uneven corn stands will cause yield losses from the very beginning of the season. As the season progressed, pollination generally occurred under beneficial temperature and moisture conditions, but this varied across the state and also across the date of planting. Early planted corn may have struggled during pollination, but had a more favorable grain fill period. Later planted corn, on the other hand, reached pollination under better weather environments, but was under a greater risk of freezing before the end of the season.
So variables that worked against each other in many respects. One plus, though, was that we didn't have an overly hot summer as Kansas summers go.
No, we really don't. It was fairly mild. The warmest readings were seen in mid-July, with the highest read of 108 degrees in Rush County. And the freezes occurred about the typical time for Kansas, with Colby dropping to 32 degrees on October 10th and Columbus reaching 27 degrees on October 31st. This, again, was a greater risk to the later planted corn because corn is negatively affected by temperatures at or below 32 degrees. The colder it is below 32 degrees, the less exposure time it takes to damage the corn and affect the final grain weight.
Well, again, though, moisture was not short whatsoever, and in fact that did adversely affect a test or two in your series of tests around the state.
As you say, most production regions were above normal for precipitation from April 1st through October 31st. The most extreme departure from normal was the southeast region, with an average of 48 inches or 158% of normal rainfall for that area. We did lose the corn test in Erie at Neosho County because it was drowned out in May. And this area, rainfall jumped above normal in April and continued that way through the growing season, causing all sorts of production issues and delaying harvest. The driest area was southwest Kansas with 95% of normal rainfall. The West Central Production Division, however, such as the Tribune area, enjoyed the most favorable moisture distribution this year, and the corn in this area expressed close to maximum yields. This can all be found in the corn book. Mary Knapp, the K-State climatologist, has provided cumulative precipitation graphs for all locations in the performance tests.
So have a look at that. There were some issues with hail around the state, and in particular with your tests at any site?
There were. We had 712 reports of large hail through August 31st, and of those events, 299 were reported in May. Of course, hail has a larger impact when it occurs around flowering or during grain filling, when the plant depends on the leaves for setting grain number and seed weight. In addition to the hail, there were also a few events of very strong winds in August in western Kansas that caused extensive lodging and ear drop. We ended up scrapping the data from the irrigated test and Garden City and Colby because of these windstorms. We had an estimated 50% ear drop in Colby because of this storm.
All of that said, with all of these obstacles, the corn crop, generally speaking, was not too bad at all. In fact, it exceeded last year's production.
It really wasn't. According to the USDA, the corn yield of 134 bushels per acre for the state was up 4 bushels from last year, with a final production estimate of 798 million bushels, which is up 153 million from 2018. So overall, a struggle, but in the end, not too bad.
Well, a quick briefing here, if you would, Jane, on pest problems that afflicted corn, the crop broadly, and your test plot specifically. What diseases did corn stands fight this year?
The disease report this year was again supplied by Doug Jardine. The total yield loss from corn diseases was below the long-term average this year. Gray leaf spot got off to a slow start, but reached normal levels by the end of the season. Southern rust had its earliest arrival this year on July 31st, but it was stalled by hot, dry weather, but it did increase with the August rains later in the season. Ear rots were present at a lower incidence, with very little Aspergillus ear rot, which causes aflatoxin, being reported. Fusarium ear rot was the most common, but there were a few reports of high fumonisin levels in the grain. Diploidea ear rot was also present, but at lower levels than the last 3 years. Due to the near optimal conditions for development, however, Fusarium stalk rot was prevalent in 2019. In a few fields that experienced mid-season drought, which weren't very common this year, charcoal rot was present. Diploidea ear rot was observed in southwest Kansas fields that received unusually high amounts of rainfall, and bacterial leaf streak was identified in several new counties in 2019, but its effect on yield is still being researched.
And as a matter of fact, speaking of research, you say that there's some interest in the effectiveness of certain fungicides on a leaf blight, which also made its presence known in Kansas corn.
Yes, there was an unusually high amount of Physoderma leaf blight found in north central and northeast Kansas, along with Nebraska and Iowa this year. And many growers had a decision to make regarding late-season fungicide applications, but the verdict is still out whether or not the fungicide was an effective management tool for this leaf blight.
So we'll see what develops of that continuing study in all likelihood. Another upside to this growing season was that the insect pressure was relatively light overall, you say.
Yes, and this is according to Jeff Whitworth of Extension Entomology. According to Jeff, 2019 was relatively but not completely pest-free. There were a few issues reported, but the growing conditions helped mitigate the problems before they had much of a negative impact this year. There were once again spider mites in western Kansas, but those were not as problematic as in past years. One insect that does seem to be increasing in Kansas is Japanese beetles. The adults can be voracious feeders on silk, but the larvae, which are white grubs, feed on the roots. These insects have been problems for years in the I states, such as Iowa, Illinois, and Indiana, but they have started to cause concern in the northeastern quadrant of Kansas. They also appeared to be migrating farther through the eastern half of the state. There were also a few reports of adult western corn rootworm in southwest Kansas that required insecticide applications, but that apparently worked well. Otherwise, it was a relatively quiet year for pests in Kansas.
Well, there's the backdrop by which the K-State 2019 corn hybrid performance trials were conducted around the state. What we want to do here is go region by region around Kansas, talk of those leading hybrids as they performed in the various tests around the state, and talk about how you break this down, Jane.
I'll mention the hybrids that did well across all of the locations in a region. This is by no means the complete list of hybrids that yielded well. This year, as well as last year, there were no overarching patterns in regards to agronomic practices or hybrid traits to the 2019 corn growing season. We did put the same maturity checks in at all testing locations, and at some, the early and late maturing hybrids did better, while at others, the medium maturing check was the highest yielding. Also keep in mind that hybrids tended to perform similarly, especially in the trials where water was not a limiting factor, which was pretty much all of them. We can only say that a hybrid is better than another if the yields differ by more than the LSD value, which is provided at the end of each table. I'd again emphasize that it's important to judge hybrids and make your production decisions using as many sources and years of data that you can. And I'd also like to thank DeKalb and Pioneer for supplying the maturity checks again this year.
Very well. And after this break, we'll get right to that region-by-region look at top corn hybrid performance around Kansas this past year, as per the K-State trials. Jane Lingenfelser, K-State agronomist, our guest, and we'll return shortly on Agriculture Today. For 25 years, K-State Research and Extension's Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services has been providing a no-cost, confidential place to call in and visit with an agricultural lawyer. Our experts are available to help you producers handle legal and financial issues. Explore your options and generate solutions. Call us at 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. Agriculture Today is back now, as we're visiting with K-State agronomist Jane Lingenfelser. Again, Jane is the person who oversees K-State's annual crop performance tests around the state. And right here today, we're centering on the corn hybrid performance trials that have just been summarized, and the data on those hybrids from this year's trials are now available to you growers to study as you think about your hybrid selection for 2020 production. So, Jane, you shared with us earlier, ahead of the break, the growing conditions by which these trials were conducted. Same conditions that our growers encountered in 2019. Not always were those cooperative. But right here, as we customarily do each year, we'll go region by region around the state and identify those hybrids which tended to stand out in the tests this year. Starting with K-State's dryland corn tests at 3 sites in northeast Kansas.
Yes, we had Severance in Doniphan County, Manhattan in Riley County, and Onega in Pottawatomie County. All these are a corn-soybean rotation, and the average yield across the region was 203 bushels. And the hybrids that did well in the northeast dryland region, DeKalb DKC 6595, Golden Harvest GX 91088, Midland 570 PR and 770 PR, and also NK 1082 did well in the northeast dryland region.
And likewise, you had irrigated tests in the Northeast, also at 3 locations.
Yes, we had Manhattan, again, in Riley County, Scandia in Republic County, and Topeka in Shawnee County. I will point out that all of these were irrigated. However, they did not require much irrigation. I think 1 or 2 times of an inch at a time for all locations. All of these are corn-soybean rotation, and the average across the region was 196 bushel. Hybrids that did well in the irrigated tests: Golden Harvest GX 91-591, also the late maturing check from Pioneer, Midland 656 PR, Phillips PSF 1091, and Rank RK 961 did well in the irrigated tests in the Northeast.
All right. There were further dryland tests in the eastern part of the state, well scattered out through that eastern third of Kansas. Tell us about those.
We had tests at Rossville in Shawnee County, Ottawa in Franklin County. Our test in Erie in Neosho County was drowned out. All of these followed soybeans. They were tough conditions, honestly. Ottawa received almost 30 additional inches of rain during the growing season, which is unprecedented for that area. But the average across the region was 188 bushels. And hybrids that did well in these tough, very watered conditions: DeKalb DKC 6595, Golden Harvest G16K01, Midland 570 PR, NK 1182, and NK 1205, and also Phillips PSF 0897 did well in the eastern dryland region.
So if you're in that eastern third of Kansas looking for a hybrid that'll bear up well in oversaturated conditions, there are some names to consider right there. Central Kansas, you had 2 sites, right?
We did. Assaria in Saline County and Belleville in Republic County. The yield across this region was 193 bushel. That is exactly 100 bushels more than 2018, so we're happy about that. And our well-performing hybrids in the central region, DeKalb DKC 6088 did well. Also Midland 594 PR, Phillips PSF 133, and Rank RK 937 did well in the central region.
And those were both dryland tests, to point out. To note here, K-State also has, for some years, conducted a special short-season hybrid test, 108 days to maturity or shorter, at 2 locations this year. That can be valuable information for those who were fighting conditions such as this year, actually.
Yes, and they were definitely tough conditions. Again, Ottawa in Franklin County and Parsons in Lebec County. Both of these locations received in excess of 30 inches more rainfall during the growing season, but the average at the short season test was 149 bushels. And the hybrids that did well in these very oversaturated conditions, DeKalb DKC 6088 and Golden Harvest GX 99944 did well in the short season trials.
Need to note right here, Jane, there were irrigated tests set up in south central Kansas at 3 locations. However, the vagaries of the weather got to every one of those, right?
Yes, we had 3 tests: Moundridge in McPherson County, Maxville in Stafford County, and Hutchinson in Reno County. All were eventually abandoned. They were planted, and then Hutchinson and Maxville were actually replanted, but received heavy rains afterwards that caused uneven stands and rendered the data unusable.
So if somebody's in the south central part of the state, reference tests from years past. That would be the recommendation there. To western Kansas, the dryland tests at 2 sites. How did they do?
We had Hayes in Ellis County and Colby in Thomas County. Both of these tests were affected by the strong windstorms that I mentioned in the introduction in August that caused extensive lodging and eardrop. And the average for these western dryland region was a 112 bushel, so far below the potential for that environment. But the good performers, DeKalb DKC 6088, our medium maturity check from Pioneer, Phillips PSF 098, and rank RK10DGVT2P did very well at Colby.
And the Western Kansas irrigated corn trials, did they meet the same fate as those in South Central Kansas?
They did, well, for different reasons. We had tests at Colby in Thomas County, Tribune in Greeley County, and Garden City in Finney County. The tests at Colby and Garden City were lost due to this windstorm. We had very lush vegetative growth that just fell over after the windstorm and rendered the data unusable. And our test at Tribune was not planted. I believe that corn entrants had the prescience to know that irrigation was not going to be needed in Tribune this year, and we did not have enough entries. But that completes the data for the 2019 corn performance tests.
Very well. And all of that is captured in the report that you mentioned, and we'll remind folks once again how they can access that data, plus much more about the test details in that report, right?
Yes, we have the list of seed treatments provided by the companies, the growing degree days, herbicide, disease, and insect-resistant traits also provided by the companies. And these are all listed in the book and online at agronomy, that's agronomy.ksu.edu, or at the KSRE bookstore. That address is ksre.ksu.edu/bookstore. And the printed copy will be available in January as an insert in the High Plains Journal.
So corn growers get a hold of that information one way or the other, and in fact it would be good preparation, Jane, for growers as they might plan to attend the upcoming K-State corn production schools. We mention those because those will get going right away in the early part of the new year. That's
right. There will be 6 corn schools offered in January and February, the first being January 6th at Montezuma, followed by January 8th at Parsons, January 10th at Wichita, February 3rd in Oakley, February 5th in Salina, and February 7th in Olathe. These all run from 9 to 2 p.m. Lunch is provided, but they require registration. More information can be found at 785-532-6940.
And, in fact, you can find more information as well, if you'd rather, at kscorn.com. kscorn.com, and you'll find the link there to the corn schools that Kansas Corn and K-State Research and Extension will be co-sponsoring in early January and early February. Take a look at those agendas. Thanks to you and all of your team for hanging in there and pulling together the reports on the corn hybrid performance trials this past year with all the hurdles that you had to clear in gathering that data. Jane will note that the grain sorghum performance trials are also complete now, and once the new year comes along, we'll have you back soon and talk about those results as well. We appreciate the summary.
Well, thanks for having me.
That from Jane Lingenfelser. She's the agronomist in charge of K-State's crop performance tests. As she mentioned, there are many ways to have a look at those performance results now. Directly online now at agronomy.ksu.edu. Look for that insert coming out soon in the High Plains Journal, and that'll also be in your local extension offices in January. And you can find the report as well at the K-State Research and Extension bookstore online. You're tuned into Agriculture Today. After this break, we'll hand it on over to Britton Rucker and her guests as they'll provide another reminder about that series of farm financial workshops for women coming up in January and February, and they're now up to 32 sites at which those will be conducted around Kansas. More on that ahead here on the K-State Radio Network.
Did you know every Kansas farmer feeds 128 plus people?
Kansas farmers are hard workers, dependable, authentic, and sensitive.
Not only do farmers put food on your table, but they put clothes on your back and fuel in your car.
For more information about Kansas farmers, visit K-State Research and Extension online or stop by your local extension office. This message has been brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. I'm Britton Rucker. Soon there'll be a series of workshops to teach principles of record keeping to develop balance sheets, income, and cash flow statements all around the state of Kansas. These workshops will be kicking off in the early part of 2020 and will be geared towards financial management skills on the part of women who can directly apply these back to their farming or ranching operations. Two individuals responsible for coordinating this event is with me now. I have Robin Reid, K-State Ag Economist, as well as LaVell Winsor, K-State Farm Analyst. So, Robin, what inspired this series, which by title is Farm Financial Skills for Kansas Women in Agriculture?
Well, LaVell and I actually did a project like this about a year ago for Washington State University, which is a broadcasted program. We weren't actually out there. We were here at K-State, but they broadcasted it throughout Washington State, Oregon, Alaska, Idaho, and Montana. And it was a very successful session just on cash flow. And we thought this would be a wonderful program to do here in Kansas, but not just focus on cash flow, focus on 4 different topics in farm financial management and gear it towards agricultural producers, farm women across the state.
And LaVell, this is a really different format than most conferences or meetings.
Yes, it is, because Robin and I will be on campus and we will be broadcasted live to 32 locations across the state. At each session, we will focus on one particular financial concept, and then back at the location, at each of the 32 locations, then the participants will actually have a hands-on activity that they will work together in small groups to complete, and then they will actually have material that they can take home and ideally maybe even incorporate that into their own farm the next week or in the few weeks following. So it's something workable that they can use right away in their own operation.
Now, these workshops are 4 weeks in a row, and you really encourage people to attend all 4.
Yes, we realize that there will be some conflicts here and there, but each night builds on the program material from the previous week. So we really encourage participants, get those dates on their calendar and make sure they attend all 4 so they don't miss any of the material. But it does run as a series, so you can't just pick and choose nights. We would like participants to make it a priority to attend all 4.
Now, Robin, this is a combination between long-distance outreach as well as local speakers, correct?
Yes, so we will have local expertise as well, so you're not just sitting there and listening to us the whole time. We'll be doing the keynote addresses each night, but we will have local topics, one of them being this is a different kind of stress, focusing on, just looking at what financial stress does to the operation, to the family, to, mental health, getting in that realm a little bit. We've had the ag economy has been down for a while now, and we know that there is a lot of stress out there when it comes to farm finances. So we want to incorporate that topic into our program as well. But that'll be a local speaker, so they can facilitate some of that discussion between the group locally. Another topic that is going to be a local presentation is managing family living expenses. When we talk about farm finances, we really encourage people to separate family living from farm finances. But we realize in the big picture that family living, the money that's drawn out of the farm, does have a huge influence on the viability financially of the farming operation. So we are going to talk about that as well with a local speaker.
LaVell, you mentioned earlier, but there will be a series of video conference. What will you cover directly in those sessions?
So the financial concepts that we're going to be talking about at the first session, we're going to go over record keeping and talk about the importance of that and some different ways that folks can focus on the record keeping in their own operation. The second night, we will discuss balance sheets. We'll look at the importance of creating a balance sheet. And with each one of these sessions, we're also going to talk about how people can use these records for managing their own operation, and also some things that maybe a lender is looking at in their operation. Then the third session will be on income statements, and then the fourth session will be on cash flows.
So, Robin, who is this program really aimed towards?
Hopefully, this program would be designed for any level. So we realize there's some women out there that maybe are starting their own operation or are just on the fringes of a spouse running an operation and they're kind of knowledgeable but not terribly involved in it. Mm-hmm. All the way up to the level of women that, managing their own operation, do their own records, look at their own finances. I was just talking to a lady on the phone that is in that exact situation, and she said, well, I want to come just to see what else I can learn. Mm-hmm. And I think there's going to be something for everyone in that respect, that we hope that we can get some advanced skills for people that are already doing this, and then just some general knowledge for people that are starting out, looking at their farm finances and making these financial statements.
And even though this program is designed to highlight women's issue in agriculture, it's open to men as well. So.
Yes, the program material is geared towards women, but we do want to have folks know that we know that financial topics are pertinent to everybody, and either gender is welcome at the meetings.
LaVell, what is required to be a part of these workshops?
What I would encourage people to do is to go on to agmanager.info, click on the events tab, and then they scroll down a little bit. They will find the Farm Financial Workshop, and they can register online. If somebody does not have internet access, they can also call their local extension office and sign up at their closest location that they would like to attend. There is a $40 registration fee. That covers the meals here and some of the materials as well. But also, we do want to highlight as well that we do have a grant that is supporting this program. The North Central Extension Risk Management Education is providing a large percentage of the support towards bringing this programming to Kansas producers.
And once again, that due date is quickly approaching, and you guys are really encouraging people to register.
The deadline is December 31st, and we have a grant supporting this project. The series is approved for Farm Service Agency FSA borrowers financial training credit. So any of our participants that go through this program that have an existing FSA loan that they still need these credits, or they're applying for a new loan, can go through this series and get that training. And that's the financial piece of that borrower's training.
Well, once more, this is going to be a very intriguing series of 4 workshops taking place the evening of January 15th, 22nd, January 29th, and February 5th. Once again, this series is a first of its kind, taking place at 32 sites all around Kansas. To find out which sites are hosting, you can go to the agmanager.info website. A big thanks to K-State ag economist Robin Reid and K-State farm analyst LaVell Winsor for coming over and talking about this. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
I'm Britton Rucker, and we'll return with more after this short break over the K-State Radio Network.
What is radon? Home exposure to radon gas is the leading cause of lung cancer death in the United States for non-smokers. In Kansas, 1 in 4 homes will test at or above the EPA action level. The Surgeon General recommends all homes be tested and fixed if necessary. Visit kansasradonprogram.org for more information. Test, fix, save a life. This message brought to you by the Kansas Radon Program, the Kansas Association of Broadcasters, and this station.
Up now on Agriculture Today, this week's horticulture segment. And we're going to whet your appetite for vegetable gardening right here in the depths of winter conditions in Kansas. For By Our Way once more, horticulturist Ward Upham, K-State Research and Extension, on a little vegetable gardening planning for this coming year. Folks have time to do this. This is the point, Ward. And the first thing you'd like them to do is reflect back on this past year and what they grew and where.
That's right. So make a map of this year's garden. And so you know where things were for next year, because that's important. You don't want to put the same thing in the same place. And so tomatoes don't go back where tomatoes were last year. But you also have to keep attention to those that are closely related. Tomatoes and peppers and potatoes are closely related. Therefore, you don't want your peppers in the same place your tomatoes were last year. So just move things around, help keep insect and disease problems more under control. The other thing is if you had any problems like with standing water this last year, then you may want to add an extra bit of topsoil to make sure you don't have that problem the next year. And so this is the time of year to really reflect on what you did. Also take notes on what did well, what didn't do well, so you know what varieties would be good to choose.
So a good record of this past growing season would be in order here. And if it's possible, you say now, one should go ahead and work their garden soil up, if they haven't already.
If they haven't already. And that depends on whether it's wet or not. If it's too wet, you don't want to work it up because you're going to be fighting clods. Now, actually, over the winter, those clods are going to break down because of the freezing and thawing, but still, it's not a good idea to work that soil wet. So take a fistful of soil and squeeze it. If water comes out, it's way too wet. If it doesn't, take a finger and poke into it. If it crumbles, you're dry enough. If it doesn't, you just make a dent. It's still too wet. And don't just test just the very top of the soil. Get down maybe 2, 3, 4 inches and test that, because that may be a little bit wetter. But if it's dry enough, this is a good time in order to work it for a couple of reasons. One is that there are certain insect pests, such as squash bug, that will use that old debris in order to overwinter, and you want to prevent that. Also, we may have a wet spring where it's going to be too wet to till anyway. And tilled soil in the fall is going to dry out a whole lot quicker than what is not tilled. And the third thing is that's an excellent time to add organic matter. Mm-hmm. So if you have leaf litter or anything like that, you can work it in.
If conditions allow, that is. You get this question as folks start to plan for the next growing season with some regularity, Ward, using old garden seed held over from the previous season or seasons, as the case may be. Is that a good idea?
Yes, you can do that. And the reason that it's often a good idea is that seed just seems to be getting more and more expensive. And so what you want to do is look at what type of seed you have. Most seed is going to last about 3 years. There are other seeds, such as those that are in the carrot family, such as carrot, parsnip, and parsley, that are short-lived. They'll only last 1 or 2 years. If you're not sure, if you have a little bit older seed, you can do a germination test if you have enough seed.
And that's a simple procedure, you say.
It's really simple. What you take is 10 seeds and put them in moist paper towels, wrap them up, and then put them inside a plastic bag and put them on top of the fridge. A little bit warmer up there so you get better germination. Check them after a week, and then count the number that have germinated. And if they haven't all germinated, roll them back up and let them go another week, and that'll give you your germination percentage. Usually you want about 8 out of 10 germinating. You can get by with a little bit less than that. You're just going to have to seed a little bit more thickly in order to get a good stand.
And you don't need warming lamps or anything like that?
No, you just need that warm temperature. So, closer it is to the ceiling, the better it's going to be.
So do check out the viability of your seed before you commit to that seed for planting this next year. Or, alternately, you can order new seed. Guidelines there that you'd offer, Ward.
So first thing, remember what you grew last year and grow those things that did well for you. And so if you're not sure what will do well, if it's a new crop, something like that, check with your neighbors, check with garden centers, or we have publications online that allow you to pick varieties that have proven to do well in Kansas. And so that will get you off to a good start with actual varieties that have proven themselves. Second thing, watch the number of seed per packet. If you look at the cost of the packet may not have changed, but the number of seed per packet may have. And therefore, it used to be when you got tomato seeds, you probably get 20, maybe 25 per packet. Now it may be 10 or it may be 5. Mm-hmm. And so you have to make sure you get enough seed for what you're wanting to do. If that seed seems to be getting too expensive, one of the ways you can get around that is get several of your friends together and put in a bulk order. That way you get the cost per seed down, but also you cut down on shipping costs. And so that can be a way that you can save some of your money in order to get what you actually want to have.
But this is all part of good planning. You don't want to short yourself on available seed. Come spring, you may not have the chance to reorder that seed. It could be tapped out, if you will.
It very well could be. The other thing you want to do as soon as you get those packets in is write on the packet the year you ordered it, so that you can keep track of how old the seed that you have left is.
So think ahead there and look into what seeds you have on hand, what you'll need to order, and those garden catalogs will be out quite soon if they're not already. One final actual management step that one can consider right here in the depths of winter. If you grow asparagus, you can possibly trim that up. Talk about that.
Yes, so you can either trim it up now or can trim it up in the spring. It doesn't really matter. Some people like to leave it over the winter just because it collects snow, and therefore, if they're worried about moisture levels in the soil, that can help increase the moisture levels. This year may not be a problem. And so if you don't like the looks of it, you can go ahead and cut it down. It's not going to make any difference.
But you should, before the next growing season, cut it down by all means.
That's
a management step, right?
That's right. So before that new comes up, which is usually early April around the Manhattan area, you want to make sure it's taken down. If you're in southern Kansas, probably by mid-March is when you want that gone.
All right, so that's one thing to conduct right here and now. But once more, you can start getting excited again about the vegetable gardening season to come through some good planning. And these are good guidelines to follow in that respect. Ward, as always, thank you and happy holidays to you and yours.
You bet.
Ward Upham, along with us for this week's horticulture segment, a horticulturist with K-State Research and Extension. And our time is away once again. Dropping in this reminder about our podcast service. If you haven't looked into that, please do so at agtoday.net for listening to a replay of each day's broadcast or for subscribing to the automatic download to your mobile device. agtoday.net. In the meantime, thanks for listening in right here today. Eric Atkinson here. This has been Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.